Hey, what's going on, everybody? I feel like there's a little bit of a lack of enigmatic content out there right now, and so I wanted to start making some enigmatic content, primarily leagues, maybe even going through some more fringe versions of enigmatic for those who can't get fables or just want to try different, playstyle from the average. This year is going to be my Naya Enigmatic list. If I was going to go to a tournament, this is what I would bring. This is what I'm feel pretty confident playing on MTGO leagues. I like it a lot, and I've been doing a lot of math and things like that to kind of get the mana and everything else right. Um, so the reason I call this Naya Enigmatic is you can kind of see it here in the early turns. It's very heavily focused on Naya colors, primarily white. We got a lot of white early on, but then we also have Beanstalks and Bitter Reunions in addition to Fables in the early turns. Turn 3 plus is when we start getting into our different colors. We still are pretty strongly in Naya-based colors, though, if you look. So the basis of the deck was kind of originally came from Up the Beanstalk. It's just a really really good card. It's a 2 mana cantrip, which the deck already wants. If you look at this, like compared to like Naya's Presence, it's other than the land typing, we're still cantripping, which is great. But the big advantage is primarily once we get into the late game, we can start drawing cards. We're going to be, playing stuff with fires for free. We want to be casting expensive stuff like Kenrith and all these leyline bindings, so on and so forth. And this just allows us to keep drawing cards, keep the engine fueled, and we just keep moving on and hopefully present like an unbeatable card advantage is kind of the goal. And so some of the original concept of it was to, well, I want to go heavier into the card draw spells that matter. Before I was on reunions and omens and presence and all this, and you're really stretching yourself thin because then not only do I need red, blue, green on turn two, I need white as well for all these chains and the bindings and everything. You really start to stretch yourself thin, and so Beanstalk being as good as it is, I decided, well, we should just try to focus up the colors on the early turns, use really powerful card draw to just find the lands that we need, get the sources we need. So we find the blue, which is lightly splashed here, and black, which is very lightly splashed here. We just have the Blood Mage and the Atraxa, and that's it. Those are our only black cards. So doing this lets us really focus up our mana base. It's going to make us more consistent, and it's going to help us just progress our game plan in a better way. We already know we want to be on red because we have Fables and Fires here. These are a really big part of the deck. So I'm playing Bitter Reunion. I think, filtering away one dead card, usually a land, sometimes just a silver bullet you don't need to draw 2 new cards is really, really strong. And Beanstalk, like I talked about, is very, very good. If we're looking at the other 2 slots, I want 10 cantrips, or 10 2 drops. Well, 10 cantrips, 10 2 drops, kind of the same thing. To be able to just go get my 3 drops and progress my game plan and my thought process here as well. I'm already playing white, and a lot of it, right? I've got all these chains, the bindings, all this removal in white. But in the against aggro decks, I kind of want to be progressing my board state, but before turn 3. We just have removal before turn 3, and then we start getting creatures and fables and all that on turn 3. So I wanted to develop to the board with creatures, and then I also wanted to be able to, let's say we're playing against mono white, for example. They're going to usually slam a Thalia on 2. So the Spirit Companion is really, really good here because this allows me to keep developing my board. I can play the Spirit Companion on 2. I can still cantrip under a Thalia because it's not a non-creature spell, it's just a creature. So I really like the Spirit Companion for that. And it's just a creature. Also, if I'm playing against control or Lotus or something pre-board, I'm going to have some number of chains in the deck. And so I can just basically cycle a chain, play it, sack it to Enigmatic, get a Spirited Companion. If I have a second Enigmatic, I can sack the Companion, or I can just wait until next turn to sack the Companion again. But it draws me in a card in the meantime, so it can be pretty good there. And I really actually have come to like having the 2 Spirited Companions here as opposed to something like, say, 2 Dahlia's Presence or, Path to the World Trees here instead. I really, really like these so far in my playtesting. Another thing that you'll see different that I'm doing than other decks is I'm playing two Fateful Absence. I have the standard 4 chain, 4 binding. This is kind of standard right now for any Enigmatic deck. It's just both of these are really, really strong removal pieces. But on top of that, I have these Fateful Absences. They do a few different things. One, it's just instant speed, unconditional removal. It's just there's no okay, I need domain. Oh, I need mountains, right? And it's instant speed. It also removes planeswalkers, which can be really good into mono green. Can be really good into control. You know, sometimes even Lotus Field, it can kill their Chandras and Liers and things. It just is proven to be more versatile than originally thought. The main original reasoning behind it was for the mirror matchup and for Bring to Light matchups, specifically Elesh Norn. Nothing can turn off this deck more than an opposing Elesh Norn, right? And so, for in the mirror, staring down an Elesh Norn, this is the card I want to see pre-board, post-board. Post-board, we have things like Verdict that make it a little bit better, but Fateful Absence is really, really strong in that sense. And the downside of giving them a clue, 2 mana draw card, yes, it's like a real downside, and yes, it's relevant sometimes, but just 2 mana, again, unconditional removal. It's been really, really good. I highly recommend. I go into a little bit more detail on this in the primer in the deck description. The 3 drops are relatively standard. Skyclave is great removal. Glasspool is a land and copies your silver bullets. Deputy is just good, removal for a wide board state. It's good for tokens. Does a lot of things. Where things start to get different is in the rest of the 3 drops I have. So I still have the Blood Mage. I think having the 1 of is very, very important. And the reason for that is if you look at a lot of the current exile hate, it's just not that good. The thing that I want is I want to be able to play Fires into Enigmatic on turn 4. And if I need Grave Hate, to be able to immediately get it and no strings attached, right? And that's Blood Mage. Is that I just go get him, exiles the target player's graveyard just immediately, and we're set. And worst case, let's say I'm not playing against a graveyard deck, I can just draw me a card. Or if I'm against aggro, I can get him. I wouldn't. Well, that's not true. I probably wouldn't get him against aggro. But if I draw into him pre-board against aggro, I can drop him, get 2 bodies out of it, gain a life. It can really help stave off some damage. It can be really, really good. There's a new version of this basically in white that's coming up, and in Lost Caverns of Ixalan, and as soon as that is legal, Blood Mage is probably no longer relevant again, unless you're playing black in the deck, and then he's really, really good. But in a version like this, where I'm trying to trim on the colors, I'm mostly Naya focused, and we have the blue splash basically for Enigmatic and some of these few other cards. We would absolutely just probably drop this Blood Mage and play something else. It's just the best at its mana cost. I also have Tranquil Frillbacks here, so this is kind of a backup to Exile Graveyard, and it also kind of fulfills what I would want out of Night of Autumn. In the past, I've run Night of Autumn, and I really like the card, and it does a lot of things, but I think right now, Frillback's ability to be backup Graveyard Hate is a big deal. There's not really a whole lot of decks where I need to be destroying artifacts and enchantments. I mean, it's like mono green, maybe vehicles in Greasefang. You probably don't have time to just snipe, unless they've already, just played Nasika's Chariot or something. Even still, I generally have time to pay for throwback, but this is just backup Grave Hate. And I can also gain life and destroy things with it. I can do all of them. I don't have to pick just one. And people will go one way or the other on this versus Night of Autumn. I like Frillback, personal preference. You could play Night of Autumn in this slot and be totally fine. But I think there's enough upside of Frillback to still be playing them. Some people will play like an Archon of Emirian or a Firefang Sensor main board. I'm playing Redain instead. The main reason for that being is that pre-board, Archon is just Archon or Sensor is just not as relevant in as many matchups, and it's going to be holding yourself down, preventing you from progressing your game plan, and not that good. So if we look at the front side, this is really good into mono green. It's really good into control, really good into Lotus Field combo, bring to light, really really good in all of these spots because we're going to be just preventing our opponent from casting things when they normally would on curve, right? Where then if we look at the backside, this Valkyria is amazing into aggro decks. We just turn it on its back and everything deals one less damage, and the targeting thing is less relevant. Well, that's not true. It can be really, really relevant. If your opponent tries to do like a burn spell on you or your creatures, they're going to have to pay one more mana, which can be a big deal. A lot of people don't actually pay attention to that clause. They just look at the one damage thing. And I've even seen people who just don't even pay attention to the one damage. They send in 1/1s and it just doesn't matter, right? This can be a huge, huge, huge tempo swing against an aggro deck, and so it's really, really worth having, in my opinion. And for that reason, that's why I run Redain main board. It's just relevant to almost all matchups pre-board. And then I'll have the Archon Phyrexian Sensor effect in the sideboard. The last one, in terms of the 3 creature drop slot that I have at iTech, is Wandering Mind. Now, others would play like a Moonblessed Cleric in this spot. Yes, it's a tutor. Yes, it gets you exactly what you want. The problem there being, it's what I want for next turn, or if I have a cycle to get the card off the top. I have to do something else to get that card. I don't get it right away. And the other thing is that Moonblessed Cleric is terrible if you draw it and I have an Enigmatic on the field, right? Unless I have a way to get that card. Because if I play the Moonblessed, it's just a 3/2. If I go search, I put it on top, and I choose to search the Enigmatic, I just immediately shuffle away that card. Moonblessed did nothing for me, right? I also just, anytime you have, let's say, an Elishnorn out, or you're blinking with Yorion, the Moonblessed Cleric, just the second trigger, doesn't matter. Doesn't do anything, right? You just search again, shuffle. So now if we look at Wandering Mind, if I have double the triggers through Elishnorn, through Yorion, through both, I am drawing a card each time. It is card neutral, and if I'm blinking it, I'm just adding cards to my hand. Now, there's the downside of, yes, I'm not going to tutor exactly what I need, but you're looking 6 deep in an 80 card deck, and it's actually going to be even less than that because you have her many turns away. So in the deck that I'm linking, I've got a bunch of math on how Wandering Mind works. So if I'm playing Wandering Mind, like let's say even just on turn 3, just on curve, there's a 95% chance that I'm going to get anything, just based on the amount of non-creatures on the deck. 95% chance you're going to get something. There are those chances where obviously you don't get anything, and like those suck, but at the same time that means you weren't going to draw anything that you needed in the next 6 cards, and so those are out of the way, right? My next draw is going to probably have something useful. So it's really good in that respect. I mean, there are chances you miss, and that's fine. But another reason that Wandering Mind is really, really big is that, I have these cards like Fateful Absence. I have Valakut Awakening, which I'm going to talk about. And then I have all of these spells in the sideboard, like the counter spells, Board Wipe, Rending Volleys. These are not enchantments. I can't tutor these, right? Wandering Mind finds me all of these cards. It finds me all of my sideboard cards, all my main board cards that I actually want that aren't creatures. So it's like a really, really big deal. If I'm looking at my 3-drop creatures, the Wandering Mind's the best in my opinion. It's the best value creature. It never disappoints me. I'm always happy to play it or draw it. Or even searched off Enigmatic. If I have nothing else to do, I'll definitely just go get a mine, try to find like a binding or something to set up for the following turn. It's just really, really good. Really, really worthwhile. So that's all the 3-drops. 4 Fables, it's just the best. I think the best card in Pioneer right now, and it's an enchantment, so it synergizes really well with everything we're doing. Ramps, filters, and then once it flips, if we get to keep it, it just goes insane to the deck. You start copying all your creatures. You start copying Wandering Minds. Like I said, Wandering Mind is amazing. Copy that with the Fable. It's really, really great. And another thing about the Wandering Mind, and I know I'm talking a lot about it, but I generally think it's really, really good, is it's a 2/1 flyer. The flying is a big deal. Comes up a lot. It is really, really relevant. So I'm going to talk about Valakut Awakening in a bit. This is something new I've been working on. And again, there's more info about this in the primer of the deck. Looking at 4-drops, so we have these Fables for our 3-drop. Not always am I going to be sacrificing these. Generally, I want to be using them for their full value. So I only have one 4-drop right now, and right now that's Heliod. I like Heliod a lot. There's a lot of good options for 4-drops, so I would say this one's generally a personal preference, to be honest. I like Heliod because it's got a lot of upside versus thing like Lotus Field. If I can flip the Heliod over, lets me play on their turn. They're going to be drawing spells, so my spells cost way cheaper. And it can be really, really useful to help, like, kind of quell what they've got going on. 4 Fires, 4 Enigmatic, I think is relatively self-explanatory in these kind of decks. These Fires is just such a good engine, and obviously the deck is named after this card, so we're going to be playing a full playset of it. Once we move into the 5 and 7-drops, Elishnorn is crazy cracked, so it's going to double over triggers. There's a lot of really crazy play patterns you can do from Elishnorn, and it's also going to be stopping whatever opponent's doing. So if we're playing in the mirror, playing it Bring to Light, these type of things, it just prevents our opponents from getting value as well. Cav is really, really good. The deck I found wants some amount of recursion. I have that somewhat in Heliod, right? But I also want to be, getting back Leyline Binding. I want to be getting these other things back. And so Cavalier can do that for me. If he dies, I get something back from my graveyard, an enchantment directly to my hand. I don't put it on top like with Cavalier of Thorns, which, like, the downside though is that, Cavalier of Thorns puts anything. But Cavalier Dawn puts enchantments directly in my hand. There's a line where, you can get a Cavalier, destroy itself, get back Leyline Binding, for example. That was kind of a big deal when somebody did that for the first time. It's an interesting line. So there's some interesting things to do. Another thing that's important is that it's a 5-drop, and so then it synergizes with the Beanstalks here. Originally, I had like Gloom Shrieker and things like that to return stuff from the graveyard, but Gloom Shrieker is 1 black, and 2 is only a 3-drop. So the black is, presses the mana base because, it's not a whole lot of black. Like I said, I only have 2 black cards in this iteration. And the Cavalier drawing cards with the Beanstalk is a big, big deal. Another thing is you can see we're really heavy on white, and so Cavalier being white is an easy include, right? It's not going to be stressing my mana base at all to do that. Next 5-drop is Tolsmir. You'll see this in almost all Enigmatic decks. It's just a really, really good card. It's something that can help you turn the corner against aggro. It gains you life. It gives you 2 bodies. If you have Elishnorn out, you can just do insane, crazy things with Tolsmir. So Tolsmir is very, very good. Draw some cards. All of these 5s and 7s are going to be drawing cards, so I shouldn't have to say that for all of them, but Tolsmir is very, very worthwhile. Kenrith is just kind of like the toolbox within the toolbox, right? You go Kenrith, you can haste out of nowhere. You can put counters on things to make your blocks better or your attacks better. You can gain life against aggro, and you can, draw a card against control, or you can reanimate against, control, or just really anything else as well. Like, he's just an all-star, very, very strong. If you're playing white, he's just an auto-include. 7-drops, I'm running 3 7-drops. Some people run 2. Again, personal preference thing. I think 3 is more worthwhile nowadays, especially with the Beanstalks, and especially just with, like, Rakdos being one of the top decks. There's a chance I'm going to draw a 7-drop and it's going to be discarded, so I want to go find other things. If I lose one of them, I still want to have 2 of them available to me. So I have Atraxa. Atraxa is just crazy good. Really good into a lot of matchups. Just look at 10 and you get, however many cards. Running things like Fateful Absence allows me to get, potentially one more card. And then you've got some sorceries like in the side, like at this in the sideboard as a sorcery. So, you can help get you some more stuff with the Atraxa, but looking 10 deep and drawing 3-4 cards can be really, really good. Really, really good when you blink it, and then just flying Vigilance, Death Touch, Lifelink is an insane set of keywords that can just be game over for any aggro deck. If you just turn 4 Atraxa, there's just nothing they can do about it, and you just win. And I've just had people scoop immediately after they see the Atraxa. Don't even let me resolve the trigger. It's just really, really good. Titan is really, really great because, well, one, it's not legendary, so we can copy with Fable, we can copy with Glasspool, double up those triggers. It's a giant 7/7 reach trample. The reach is a big deal, and the trample's a big deal. This card's really good at closing doors. You can also, make 4/4s with this. So you can, go sack Binding and put 11 power onto the board, 7 of it being trample. This is just a really versatile card. You can destroy a target artifact or enchantment. You gain 5 life against aggro and the like, and then you can just, make a 4/4 as pressure. Or you can even put a shield counter on things. I've had people, where I put a shield counter on this and make a 4/4, for example. They go to kill the Titan, and then you just keep the Titan because it has a shield counter, and that can be a huge, huge deal. Because you can just answer any of these with just like a go for the throat, for example. And if you think your opponent might have that, you should definitely put a shield counter on it. They don't always realize what a shield counter does, and so that can be a big, big deal. You can also put shield counters on other things. You can be like, well, this Elish Norn is what's holding this game down. This, Redain is what's holding this game down. I can put a shield counter on it, and that's going to prevent one instance of death. So it can be a big deal. I really, really like this card a lot. The last 7-drop I'm doing is Coma. Some people have Agent and Atarka. There's actually a lot of options here. So this one I would say is like the quote-unquote flex 7-drop. I like Coma just because I get another one of those cards that's just good into really any matchup pre-board. Against aggro, this can just be game over because you're making every turn cycle, 2-3-3s, and you can tap down their creatures if they've got like big creatures with trample. If they're trying to get through, you just sack a serpent and tap it down, and it can't attack. It's really, really good against control. It's very sticky, very hard to answer. They have to exile it through a Binding, through a Sunfall, through a March, something. They have to devote a lot more resources than just a simple kill spell, right? Because you can just make it indestructible. And it can't be countered, right? So it's even better into control, right? It's really, really good. And then it's also pretty good in the combo. You just tap. So the tap skill comes with its activated abilities can't be activated. Like that's just a rider on the tap target permanent. So I can disable my opponent's Nykthoses. Against Mono Green, I can disable the Karn. I can disable Ronas. I can any of these pieces. Tyvars. You probably would want to disable a Rona or a Tyvar, but you kind of get the point. You can disable these really important key pieces in a combo deck if they need to be tapping and untapping. Emery against Breach. Really, really, really good. Or not Breach. That's Breaches in Modern, but Emery is Jeskai Ascendancy and Pioneer. But you get the gist. It's really, really good into those type of matchups. And so that's why I like Coma. I mean, you can play Agent here, but Agent just doesn't do much in a lot of matchups. It's good against like mid-range. It's good against like maybe control. It's just, and it's much better to be blinked, right? Coma, if I want something that's blinked, I've got these two. I've got Trax, I've got Titan. Coma's just like here's a threat, deal with it. So, really, really like it for that. I'm not going to dive into the mana base, really. All of this is in the deck primer, which I've linked. I will talk about Valakut Awakening here. This one, something new I've been trying out, and it's proven to be just worth every bit of what it does, right? So the deck runs into problems a lot, right? We have so many lands. One, it's an 80 card deck, so you have just reduced consistency to start, but you see some lists with like 34 lands. It's just, in my mind, that's just far too many. Far too many. and you'll see these lists, they're just constantly flooding out. And, I've seen other streamers just, the limited enigmatic streamers, they're just flooding out like crazy, right? It's like land, 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 you can't do anything about it, and it sucks. And so what I've done is I actually took to the internet. I read a bunch of the Frank Karsten articles. He's really done and sat down and done all these math, curve fitting, and things like that. Figured out what is the number of lands you actually need to run the deck, and putting in the math for all this, you get down to the optimal number of lands is like 31 and a half lands. And I was running 33 lands, 32, 33 lands. And so I'm 1.5 plus lands too many, right? So no wonder I'm seeing so many lands, right? And people are flooding, especially if 34, right? If optimal is 31.5 and I have 34, this is just, I have far too many lands. And so first thing I did was, okay, well, I need to kind of look at what I have, cut down to 31 lands to get to that like half number. So MDFCs are considered about 0.38 of a land according to Frank Karsten. This again is all his like curve fitting and stuff like that. So I'm already running a glass pool, just because it's really, really good. It's a land and it's a copy effect. Like, it's just kind of amazing what it does. And so then I was looking at, hey, what are the other MDFCs I could be playing? Easily you could be playing another glass pool, and I think people do that. And I've done it before, and it's definitely worth it. Like, having a second glass pool can be a big, big deal. But one of the things I wanted to do is I just wanted to explore, like, how do I help enable consistency? How do I help get rid of extra lands and the like? And I was talking to one of my friends, and I had the idea of Valakut Awakening. It's really almost perfect. So in my list, what I did is I ended up just cutting a Triumph for this, so I didn't lose really any power or speed or anything like that. I traded a tap land for a tap land. If I'm not playing this as a spell, it's just a tap land. The tap's for red, and because it just taps for red, I had to tweak, the numbers and the kinds of, lands in the mana base, and that's like not a huge deal. And again, I go into more detail of that, but if I'm looking at Valakut Awakening, if I consider this just as like a try, right? It cycles itself for 3, because Valakut Awakening says any number of cards draw that many +1. So you could just do Valakut Awakening just by itself and nothing else, and you'll still draw a singular card, which is great, right? If I draw just Valakut Awakening, it can be just a redraw. Now, the beauty of Valakut Awakening comes from hands that are less than ideal, right? I have Valakut Awakening, I've drawn enough lands, I'm doing okay, and I have Valakut Awakening, but say I have a bunch, 7 drops, silver bullets, extra lands, all these things that I don't want. I can cast Valakut Awakening, I can cash 2, 3, 4 sometimes cards, get a fresh set, put back all these things that I don't need right now, and draw 3 or 4 new cards sometimes, and it's just amazing. It's just, once you do it a few times, it's just not something you'll ever stop doing. So I really like this card a lot. I've playtested with it a lot. I highly recommend playing it, trying it out at least. Like I said, you could do a second glass pool, and that's totally valid. You get the math works the same. So this one technically has 31.7 lands into, optimal is 31.5 according to the Frank Karsten stuff. So, I mean, that's in the noise, right? So, I really, really like this Valakut Awakening. Highly recommend it. That's it for the main deck stuff. Let's talk about the sideboard. Yorion, of course, 80 card decks. I'm running Yorion. Yorion's amazing. So I have, you'll see sometimes people playing 4 disputes. I have 2 disputes, 2 veto. I've seen a lot of combo lately, and a lot of, Rona combo and Lotus Field. It's just not much we can do about that. It's just really kind of like a hope they don't have it type of thing. There's certainly things you can do to try, to improve your odds there, but to me, I've felt having the Dovin's veto 1 and 2 over Mystical Dispute 3 and 4 has been a big help. I can, watch my Lotus Field opponent just kind of go off, do their thing, then go to cast Emergent Ultimatum, and then I just counter it with Veto, and then they're just stuck with nothing. They spend all these resources to get to that point, and then they have nothing else. And that can really help you so much. Turn the corner. It can help you just buy you time, right? It can be really, really important. I'm running Nimble Larcenist just because it's amazing in these same kind of matchups. Control, combo, just it's a Thoughtseize on a body, and it hits artifacts as well, so it can be semi-relevant in Greasefang and Mono Green as well, and like rule vehicles. So it's a really, really good card. I like it a lot. There is a danger in Control that they just Mystical Dispute it, or like Phoenix, they Mystical Dispute it. There is a danger there, and if you're like truly worried about that, and you have a lot of Control and Phoenix in your locals, maybe you can run Sin Collector instead. Does the same thing, it just doesn't hit artifacts. So I'm running Phyrexian Censor here as my like rule of law effect, anti-combo effect. The other options are kind of Emeria here. The difference between the two is that Archon of Emeria says non-basic lands enter tapped, whereas Phyrexian Censor says non-Phyrexian creatures enter the battlefield tapped. So there's a slight advantage there, right? The Archon is good if you're playing against mono green and mono green only. All their Nykthoses and things like that enter tapped, so that can be a big deal. However, Phyrexian Censor, all of their creatures are going to be entering tapped, so you can attack through. They can't block. This is good against Greasefang because Greasefang will enter tapped, and so they can't crew. This will be really, really good into like any haste aggro style deck, right? If you're playing against like mono red, where they have like Monastery Swift Spears or Kumanos or things like that have haste, Reckless Bushwhacker or coming out of Convoke or stuff like that, they all enter tapped, and so then they can't attack through and they can't kill you. This can be a really, really, really good card in those type of matchups. In addition to having the Rule of Law effect, and this is slightly better for us than say otherwise, because it says non-Phyrexian, so we have Atraxa and Elish Norn, which are Phyrexian creatures. So there's the fringe case you'll come into where I can play Elish Norn and a Binding, for example, or Elish Norn and Chain to the Rocks, or something like, or Atraxa and something else. Those kind of lines. It's very, very fringe. You'll do it maybe once in a blue moon, but the creature entering tapped and it being a 3/3 is the important part of Phyrexian Censor. I have to rest in peace to respect the graveyard decks, namely Greasefang and Phoenix. That's also really good against things like Rona Combo, just to clear out their graveyard. I just have two. I have two Grave Hate Effects main boards, so it gets me a total of 4 in 80 cards, 2 of them being tutorable. So I find that sufficient. Some people run more than that. It really just depends on how many graveyard decks you're seeing in your meta. I think this is sufficient. Having 4 to 5 graveyard hate effects in an 80 card deck is generally enough. Over here in this stack, this is just my like anti-aggro stack basically. We've got 3 Rending Volleys, 2 Lockdowns, and a Verdict. This is just for any aggro deck. You're going to be playing this, except for like mono red, you're not playing volleys, right? But you're playing lockdowns and verdicts to just clear the board, get things out of the way. Volleys against mono white spirits, blue white spirits, Pia, all these things. Very, very good cards to have. Lockdown's just better right now because with stuff like Pia or Convoke, they're going to be buffing their creatures from time to time, and Heroic as well. Not only does this not target, this also just says no matter what, they just exiled. Whereas something like Brotherhood's End, Deafening Clarion, things like that, Radiant Flames are damage based and they don't always exile. There's the downside here, and this does miss some things, but it's hitting most of the things that you care about anyways, and so then Supreme Verdict there is kind of backup for that. Some people would play 4th Rending Volley with the Supreme Verdict. I valued the Verdict more. Just having a hard, just everything is dead is really relevant in a lot of matchups. I don't always need it in like in matchups where I can't bring in any volleys, I may still want the verdict, um, like a mono red aggro or something. Sometimes it's just important to have that. Or I'll bring this against mono green or black red. There's sometimes where somebody can get ahead, um, and Wandering Mind can help me find this, so it won't be that hard to find. Running Volley is just really really good at answering all those low to the ground decks, mono white, mono blue, so on and so forth. So I don't think I really need to speak too much onto that. I also bring these in sometimes against from looking at like Omnath decks or Elish Norn decks. This can help me answer those things pretty well. So that is the long deck tech. Explaining all the choices here again. I'm going to link in the description my deck list and where to I've written all of this down for the most part and more down in the primer section of that deck, so I'd recommend check it out. I'm gonna play some leagues here in a moment. So thanks for watching.